How's it going, everyone? John here, the host of Spear Talk. Here to tell you to check out the SpearTalkPodcastStore.com. That is SpearTalkPodcast.com to check out all the Spear Talk merchandise. We have coffee mugs, we have t-shirts, we have hoodies, we have sweatpants, we have guitar picks, we have stickers, we have pins. We have it all. You name it, we got it. You can also join the Spear Talk Book Club, which sold out in 2024, and we are close to selling out 2025. So be sure to check out SpearTalkPodcast.com for all your Spear Talk podcast merchandise. Thank you all. What is up, everyone? John here, the host of Spear Talk, and we're back for the first episode of 2026 with our good friend Chris Bingham here. Chris has spent over 20 years in law enforcement, particularly a lot of time with his canine unit, Tambo. And yeah, Chris, I know it's we've been playing like phone tag and email tag with this, but it's finally good to actually see your face and jump into this today.
Yeah, man, excited to be on here, John.
What I mean, I've had canine handlers on the show before, and I'm always fascinated when they talk about the relationship with their dogs. But before we kind of get to that with you and Tambo, it's was law enforcement always the first option for you, and how did that correlate to you kind of jumping into like the canine unit divisions?
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting, John. So no, it actually wasn't. I was I grew up. My dad left early, so just me and my mom and my sister. And growing up, I didn't have that father figure in my life, and I was just kind of all over the place. So like my family was always worried about me, like finding direction and everything like that. So I didn't really, law enforcement really didn't pique my interest until I'd started taking some classes at the local community college in Maryland, and I took some criminal justice classes. And I had gotten a lot of jobs, but I'm the type, if I have a job, I need to be passionate about it, and I just never felt that way about any of the jobs. And so when I started taking these law enforcement courses, it really started to piqued my interest, and I got passionate about it. And that was kind of the start of it, man. That's how it from there. I started with a smaller department, and before going to the one I'm at now. But yeah, just it took a while to figure out what I wanted to do, though.
Was Northwestern the first choice for that?
So Northwestern, that's the one I went to recently, and that's a 10-week police staff and command school. So right now I'm in a kind of a key leadership position for my department, and that's a school for like aspiring chiefs of police, and they kind of run you top to bottom how to run a police department. It's kind of similar to the FBI National Academy. So that's something that you got to kind of earn over the years to get to go to.
Is it difficult? I assume an instructor for that type of class or that block of education where different people cover different backgrounds, whether different leadership qualities, different training. How tough is it to kind of adjust to, hey, this is what this program's teaching? Leave all the, like, bring some of the stuff you brought with you, but you're going to learn some different stuff. Like maybe your departments weren't doing great or your department's doing well, and we're just going to amplify that here.
Yeah, I mean, you got to go into these courses with an open mind. And one of the things that, being the leader that I strive to do, even though I've been doing this for a long time, is to strive to get better, every day, every year, and continue to evolve as a leader. And I think you have to go into these courses like that and just kind of go in it open minded and open to other suggestions. And it's nice because you get to hear other people speak and the things that they're going through in leadership, and they cover everything from like police wellness, which I think is one of the key things in our society, which is so important right now, to resource allocation, statistics, public relations. So they really cover everything, and dive into it. And you got to have that open mind to be able to learn. And I think it's the ones that are kind of stubborn and set in their ways and not willing to open to evolve and change that can really struggle with that.
Right. You talk about like the programs and stuff, and I was in the federal government for like 8 years, and when a classmate got killed, essentially in the line of duty, leaving training center one day, and then other people that have committed suicide when I was there. You always hear about certain programs like mental health and like this type of stuff after the event. And
Hmm.
so I don't know if that was my fault of not. Now, I was never obviously been suicidal or had that type of issue where I had to reach out to someone, but like programs like that, it is fascinating to me how you only hear about that once something already is gone too far. And so, like, can you kind of touch upon like what can departments do better in terms of, hey, like, yeah, this is the all the stuff you're gonna be doing, but these programs are also available, whether it's addiction problems or family issues or mental health and stuff like that, where it's like it's unfortunate you only hear about that stuff after someone's already taken their life.
Well, a lot of the lesson in law enforcement, it's you're the type A alpha, personality. So sometimes, you think of it of being vulnerable as being weak, and the first thing you have to accept is is sometimes it's okay to not be okay, right? And you got to be able to communicate. And I think some cops that they're afraid to bring issues up, whether it's they have a drinking problem or going through maybe a gambling addiction or other issues that they're going through to bring it up, that it's gonna affect their job. But in the end, as long as it's nothing egregious, they're there to get you, that help that you need. So you gotta be vulnerable. And for me as a leader, one of the key things I try to do for the people that work with me is build those trusting relationships with them, because then they're going to be more inclined to have that trust in you and come to you and talk to you when they're having those issues. And as you kind of go through that, and in the wellness training, that they show signs of what to kind of look for, because what happens in times in life is we're so engrossed with what's going on with ourselves, we don't see those little signs of what's going on in other people. All of a sudden they become aloof or quiet or distant, or and now all of a sudden they've never had an attendance problem and now they're missing work. And so those are the little things to pick up on. And that's why I always try to get to know the people that work for me, because when you know them, you know when things are off with them, right? And that's key. And I want people to follow me for the person I am and never for the titles that I have. And I've said this before, is there's people that you'd follow in the depths of hell, and there's others you wouldn't follow into a Starbucks, right? So
Right.
I mean, so you know those leaders, and we've all worked for good ones and bad ones. And but I strive to be that person. And a big part of leadership is servitude leadership, is making sure that the people that work for you have everything they need, know what resources they have that are available, and letting them know that it's okay to be vulnerable, or it's okay to not know something, and not getting too hard on yourself. And that happens a lot in our profession.
Right. It's recently with the whole Venezuela thing, and I can't think of the general's name, but during the press conference, they talked about the importance of training and the strategic planning and the advancing and all this stuff. And one of the quotes he said was, "We don't train to get it right. We train to not get it wrong." And I like for whatever reason, like I follow a lot of military people and people in law enforcement that like I look up to as leaders in their fields and whatever they do. It's like I found that quote very interesting, where it's like not only the importance of training, but you can't some of these instances where you have to do something, whether it's with your canine or these kick down a door or whatever, you have to get it. It's not about getting it right. It's not about getting it wrong. It's like the idea of like leadership, where it's like you have to instill that in people, where you deal with these people that could be really top of their class, best shot, best fitness, but they don't want to be led and they're not a leader themselves. So it's like, how do you kind of dictate with like your team aspect in terms of like putting people in the right position as a leader yourself?
And that all comes to know about getting to know your team, getting to know their strengths and weaknesses. And I'm the type of leader, and I tell people this all the time, is I don't have all the answers, but I always surround myself with a team that has expertise in different areas and offset those weaknesses. And I tell people all the time is that this is going to be a team effort, but and we'll take into account everybody's input. But at the end of the day, I'll make the decision based on that. But everybody has an input. And when you make people feel like they have a voice and feel like they're a part of the team, that's how you get buy-in. And getting to know them and knowing where, to strategically put them to be successful, is key. And you can still work on those weaknesses, but when you're doing certain things, you want to have people in place where they're going to be successful and build that confidence.
Right. It's as we kind of segue into like Tambo, um, and like the canine aspect, in terms of like when it goes into like what you just said about the putting the right people in place, when you're a two-man team essentially with your dog, at what point, and this is might sound crazy, but like I when a dog retires, obviously it's he's served. Like he gets a badge, like all or she gets a badge, like they're an officer. But when it comes to like those type, when it comes to the planning, like the leadership planning for something you have to do, how do you get the dog involved in the aspect where can a dog tell you or sense when you start the training or something like that, hey, this is might be the best way to do something? Like obviously, like that relationship you have with your canine, how often have you looked at your dog and been like, ah, maybe the dog's right, maybe this is the right thing to do, or like stuff like that?
Well, the one thing that, and for us, Canine 101, and I ingrained this in the, I was the canine commander for our unit for 7 years, and they've heard me say it plenty of times, is trust your dog. The dog should be, we train these dogs to where, with detection work, if they're an odor and you may think it's wrong and you're trying to go somewhere else, that dog shouldn't want to move off that odor. And it's trusting your dog, but also getting to know your dog, right? Because seeing that change of behavior. And what I mean with that is when a dog goes into odor, right, you have to be able to pick up on that change and be able to go with them. And a lot of times is when you're evaluating stuff, you can see it from a distance. A dog may have a subtle change and want to go, and you're hyper focused on another area and trying to scan them, but that dog was just trying to lead you to where the target was. So you got to be able to be entwined with your dog. You got to have that bond, and you got to it's so key to be able to read your dog. And I was fortunate enough to retire three dogs, and they were all vastly different. Tambo was a German Shepherd, and he was kind of in between my first two. My first one was a Malinois, and he was like a Tasmanian devil on a leash. And then I had Tina, my second one, and she was an all black Shepherd Malinois mix, and she was very, very, very methodical and tactical. But the more you get your hands on dogs, John, and work different ones, it makes you a better handler because you get to see how different ones work, and it's good to kind of be able to understand their behavior. But a lot of that is the dog having confidence in you because everything you do as a handler, and people see it with their pets, is their energy. Pets feed off people's energy, but canines absolutely do. They're feeding off everything that goes down the end of that lead. And I learned that early on when I first got on our team 20 years ago. My first dog, we were doing our yearly certifications, and I was going through a bad breakup with a girl, and my head wasn't in it, and I failed them miserably. And those certs aren't meant to have anybody fail, but my head wasn't in it. And what happens is when I'm not right, the dog is feeding off your energy, so you're not acting normal. So then the dog starts to act different. The dog starts false sitting or cueing off you, and there's so many bad habits that can be picked up. And I remember my mentor telling me, like, look, you got to have an imaginary trash can when you come to work and put your personal
Right.
problems aside, especially if you're working an explosive detection dog and you're going on a bomb threat. You can't be wrong. There's no
Right.
margin for error there.
So how do you kind of mitigate like your dog could have a bad day too in terms of just maybe moody or temperamental, maybe didn't like what it ate the night before, like stuff like that where it's like how do you kind of like help the dog reset like where hey, you can't bring this shit to work today either, like I can't.
Yeah, it's just kind of like people. Sometimes you gotta take him out of, if we're training or we're out on a doing something. You got to take him, and he's not right. You got to take him out of that moment for a second. Kind of. Sometimes you just got to reset him real quick and get him back in it. But you got to be able to have that trust. And for the dog, it should be muscle memory, especially when it comes to detection, because it's stimulus. They're smelling that odor response, which is a passive response. They're going to sit, and then ultimately for the dog it's a game, right? They're looking for that reward, whether it's food or whether it's a tennis ball or a Kong. Ultimately what the dog wants is that toy, so they'll do whatever they can to get it, if that means cheating. But again, that's how you have to be able to read that dog. But you're right, dogs absolutely have bad days, and if you're going to go out on a call and you don't feel like your dog's in it, then somebody else may need to go on that call if they're available for it.
Right. It's one of those things too where it's like when I recently I went through TSA or flying recently, and I noticed one of the canine handlers had like a German Shepherd, and I've seen other agencies use poodles and stuff. Now my perception of that is that dog is trained to sniff something. Like any dog, if it's trained properly, could probably sniff anything out, I would assume.
Hmm.
Obviously, you correct me, but when I see like an Australian Shepherd or a Malinois or something like that, I assume not only can that dog train for EOD detection and stuff like that, but if you have to rip someone out of a car or take someone down, is that a good way to look at it, or is it just kind of
So
like,
So for the airport, you probably saw one of the officers walking through, but for the airport, the ones like TSA, they mostly use the floppy eared dogs, and
yes,
that's because they don't want to have pointed eared dogs because of some people don't are afraid of dogs, and
yeah.
they say that the theory is the pointed eared dogs are more intimidating. So the vaporwave dogs, the ones that sniff the people, are predominantly always going to be floppy eared dogs, labs or pointers or stuff like that. But yeah, a lot of the dogs, like my first dog, Rex, was dual purpose. So he was apprehension and detection. So yeah, they can turn it off between the two, and they know. And it's just like, for example, too, when you bring that dog home. I'm a firm believer in letting that dog be a dog when you come home. It's a switch that turns on. It's kind of like us when we go to the gym, right? Or we go into boxing training or whatever. There's a switch that you turn on, and it's the same with the dogs.
When you're doing your training, whether it's the fitness stuff, the shooting, is your dog with you the whole time? So it's used to you moving around, you shooting a gun and stuff like that?
Yeah, early on we did a lot of that with gunfire. You shoot blanks just to make sure that, because what happens a lot of times when you do that initial training and you shoot the blank, the dog doesn't know where the sound's coming from. So the first thing a lot of dogs do will be aggress on the handler, and they're not doing it to be that they don't like the handler. It's a reaction, right? So they're going to be like, I don't like the sound, let me bite where that's at. So over time they become desensitized to that sound. So God forbid you did have to get in a gunfight, or shoot your weapon. That dog is going to be okay with that.
And say there is, and I apologize for all the questions because the whole thing is super fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Um, but say there's an event where it's like, say, president's coming to town, or head of state, or Olympics, or FIFA, or an event like that where you have all these different departments and federal, state, canine units. How adapt is your dog, or how do you get your dog ready to kind of deal with in the vicinity of other working dogs that obviously they're not familiar with?
Yeah, and sometimes that's tough because a lot of the dogs are those type alpha
Yeah.
personalities. Now I'll say this: it's hit or miss because my all of my dogs, there was dogs that they could be walking by and they wouldn't care, and then there's other. It's just like us with people, right? There's like, man, I hate that son of a bitch, and you
Yeah,
just
totally.
but it's just like that, and I think it's the same with dogs because there's certain ones where they just go ape shit when other dogs go around. So you gotta have that distance. I know I was out on a detail years and years ago with my buddy, and his dog's name was Rex too, and but they hated each other, and we always had to be cognizant of where the other dog was, because if those dogs got loose, they were going to go right for each other's neck. And so you got to be aware and know that some of these dogs are just not going to get along with some of the other dogs,
It's
and be mindful of that.
when I was doing the Secret Service stuff, we'd be at the United Nations in New York, and we'd do like all these checkpoints and stuff like that. You'd see like a canine unit hang out, the dogs get along, and then this third dog comes, the shift person, and those two dogs like start growling, or like they like kind of pick on the other dog. So it's like it is like we are like humans, where it's just like you get along with someone in the break room, and that one person you both hate, it just changes the whole vibe. And I always find that hilarious. The dogs are just like us.
Well, if you look at like, studying wolves and stuff like that, it's that pack mentality, right? So like for example, when Rex retired and then I brought Tina home, it was an adjustment at first. They didn't mind each other, but they didn't interact. They had a mutual respect, and they could sit on the couch, butt to butt, but they didn't interact, and it was like a mutual respect. But if someone they thought a threat was in the house, all of a sudden they're teaming up together. So they get used to each other, and then but the hard part is when you get a lot of those dogs, there's always a pecking order, right? Who's going to be the alpha, and they usually kind of just work that out over time by themselves. And ironically, sometimes, I hear from handlers it's the little Jack Russell that all of a sudden becomes
The
in
alpha.
charge.
When say something happens where there's like PTSD involved, whether there's a shooting or incident that happened, I know I can kind of understand how humans deal with it, but how do you kind of help the dog heal with a traumatic incident, or do they get affected the same way a human does?
It depends. I mean, most of these dogs are so stoic that it's hard to see when they're in pain, and that's been the case with Tambo a lot. But there are dogs that suffer from PTSD, and some of them, what happens is that they just can't work anymore. But then you run into a problem of, okay, if they're having behavioral issues now from something that happened. You could have a handler that just didn't treat the dog right, and they got that shit canned for that, and then all of a sudden the dog was overseas. Sometimes the families can't adopt them, but one of the cool things, and we'll talk about Project Canine Hero later,
Yeah,
is there an organization that helps military and police working dogs in retirement with their care. But one of the other things that they do over there is dogs that do have PTSD or behavioral issues. They have a sanctuary out there in Tennessee where they bring the dogs out there and they can live, and they work on rehabilitating them and to get them, and then eventually get them adopted out to a family that can handle them.
right on. Yeah, it's such a because I've always been curious about that because you always wonder, and I know we're going to talk about like the organizations that help dogs like that, but you always just I always when you see like the Boston City bombing, the marathon bombing that happened, and a bunch of my friends that were there, the sheriff's department, state police, and the canine units trying to sweep stuff. Where it's just like, as a human, that happens when you're there. But when you see the pictures and videos, where it's like, I know that stays with me when you see people dying in the streets and all the blood and guts everywhere. But I'm always curious because it's like with dogs, it's like they see it too. Now, obviously, they see it different than we do, but like just to kind of like when something like that happens and a comparable say an event like that happens comparable to like a regular 8-10 hour shift, is there a decompression period with your dog? Like do they need like how many hours? I know what humans need between every shift, but do dogs need an equal amount of time, or is it kind of fluctuate like that?
It fluctuates. Like for me, like I live an hour from where I work, and it was always and it was the same for me. That drive home was kind of like our decompression time to have that solitude in the car. A lot of times I would just drive, no music, and just me and my dogs, and just the solitude, and we're both just kind of decompressing. But I can tell you, for the all the dogs I've had, the minute we're home and I open up that door, they're just a dog. They're like, okay, where's my Kong at? Where's the other dogs? Or I want to go in the yard and play. And there's some people that the mentality is, okay, you need to kind of have them in obedience a lot more and segregate them. But for me, the bonds that I've created with my dogs, a lot of them have really been forged outside of work. And it's kind of like with humans, right? Building that trust. And you
Trust,
talk
yeah.
about incidents and stuff when you're going on them, and there's a lot going on. That dog's main focus is to make sure you're okay, to be loyal to you. So they give their lives to you. They're not worried about anything else that's going on, but it's you and that dog, and they're making sure that we're in lockstep, and you got their undying loyalty, which ties into that unbreakable bond that you have with them.
Right. Is there training involved with your other dogs when you bring your canine unit home in terms of, I know obviously whatever the canine unit is, you have to make sure they're whatever with the other dogs, but is there any training you have to do specifically for those dogs at home that don't know what this canine lifestyle is?
You mean the other ones that aren't working
Yeah.
dogs?
Yeah, there are working dogs.
No, I mean, for the most part, there's always a feeling out process. We always tell the handlers, look, you're going to introduce the dog slowly to your family, because a lot of these dogs, we go out and we buy them at different vendors, right? And these vendors usually go overseas and buy the dogs, and then we go out to the vendors and say, hey, we want to buy two dogs, and they'll show us seven, and then we assess them and bring them back. And we always try to get dogs that are environmentally friendly and can be social and stuff like that. But you never, but a lot of them have never lived in a home environment before. So, you're getting them home. That's why, hey, bring them out in slow increments, introduce them to the family slowly. You don't just, fling the door open and say, hey, go meet your new friends, because that, a lot of times is going to lead to a dog fight, or you don't know because the dog's in all, new atmosphere and stuff like that. But we try to mitigate that as much as possible beforehand with the selection of the dogs.
As it comes to like the diet of the canine unit and like as a relation to like does that type of dog need to do like a yearly PFT, like a fitness test for agility? Like how do you know like what do you do physically to make sure the dog is good to go every 6 or months or a year or so?
Yeah, I really got into that during my tenure as the commander. Like our dogs, we're very regimented. Our dogs need to be a certain weight. The handlers are responsible with logging the weights, every month, because and they're assessed by a vet, quarterly. And but the one thing we do is that we went to a lot of classes, and what I really realized is these dogs are like prime athletes, right? And what
Yes.
I'm saying is that, John, if you or I went out right now out the door and tried to do, a 100-yard sprint as fast as we could, we'd probably pull something because we didn't warm up, right?
Right.
It's the same for these dogs, is that if you're going to do volume of searches, or you're going to go out be doing patrol work, warm the dogs up. There's exercises that you can do with them, and that really helps with the longevity of, avoiding orthopedic issues, or making sure that, joint stiffness and other issues that, pop up with these dogs, because there is a lot of, wear and tear on the body. So, joint supplements, we put our dogs on joint supplements, and, we keep them on certain food, and making sure their weight is good, that they don't get any people food, when they're working and stuff. And you can usually tell the handlers that have given the dogs people food, because the dogs tell on you. Guy's eating his lunch, and then, the dog's
Just
standing up there. It's
sitting
like,
there.
yeah, all right, you can't tell me he hasn't had that before. So,
Well, well, that brings me to another question. In terms of like the food for the dog, does it obviously you hear these stories of different brands and chemical companies use chemicals in their food, like what's organic and what's not. Is it come down to the department dictating what the food is to eat, or does it come down to the individual handler to make sure the dog is getting the proper food? And how do you decide for like treats and dog-centric food that's actually the healthiest for your dog?
Yeah, we do a lot of research on foods and stuff like that, and what the trends are and stuff like that. So, what we decide what the dogs eat. We don't just say, hey, go out and feed your dog whatever, because you got to understand, a lot of the people that come to the unit and they're working a dog for the first time, they've only had pets in their life, right? And they don't know any better, and or they don't know the whole responsibility that goes with a working dog. So we do a lot of research looking into food, and then what treats and stuff like that. You're not just gonna give them anything. So there's a lot of research that goes into it, and each department's different. A lot of them do their researches. We consult with vets, and we go to conferences, and we see what's out there, and we talk to the different companies, and then we kind of make decisions from there.
Right. Super interesting. Because you that when you walk down like a grocery aisle or a Target or somewhere, and it seems like every year those aisles get longer and wider and bigger with all the toys and snacks. And even now, recently, I went down the line because my sister has got a couple of dogs, and I'm like, oh, maybe this dog will like this for Christmas. But then you look at the ingredients, and even I know that this can't be healthy. And so it's just
No.
like it's such a crazy thing where it's like again, like humans corporations are targeting people just to buy, oh, this looks like a really cool bacon strip, but this is actually super unhealthy for your dog. Like we look at soda or junk food and stuff like that.
Yeah, and we also identify, okay, we identify if the dog has any allergies, or,
Right, right.
because you give dogs some dogs can't eat anything meat based, right? So you may have to get something, fish based as a flavor, salmon rather than red meat in the kibble. There's dogs that just can't digest certain things, but that's all comes down to the handler, and knowing that dog, and knowing how to read that dog, knowing how to check that dog's health symptoms. And I can tell you, when we get into Tambo, um, I knew right away, when he had his emergency that happened. I checked his gums, and his gums were pale, which was indicative of blood loss. Stomach was distended. I mean, there's things that we train the handlers to look at and to know how to assess their dog and everything about them.
Right. Well, let's talk about Tambo because I know, obviously, very important to you and the organizations he works with,
Hmm.
Project K9 Hero and stuff like that. But like, how did you? I know you kind of talked briefly about the process of like jumping from your dogs, but when you land on Tam, like, what's the process, the changeover when you retire a dog? How much time do you have to find a new dog, or is there ever a moment in your time, like before you got Tambo, where you're like, maybe I just want to be a canine handler anymore? Like, 'cause obviously you put a
Yeah.
lot of time and love into all these dogs, and then you have to jump into a new one where it's like, is it like, what's that dynamic like for you?
So I got in canine early in my early 20s. I worked Rex for 7 years, and I knew right away I wanted another dog, and that's when I got Tina. So worked the length of Tina, and then I got to that decision, John. I said, I've retired two dogs, and you got to understand, and I would tell this to handlers all the time. If you decide to take another dog, you're going to get attached to it. You're going to want to keep it. So essentially, you're now committing another 7 to 8 years of work if you want to keep this dog, because you can't say in 2 years a job offer comes by, you want to go to sergeant in patrol. Well, now the dog's only 3 years old, so we can't give you the dog at that point. So you're going to have to give the dog back. So you really have to assess and think about that. So my first two, that was easy, and then I was kind of ready because what happened is after I retired, Rex and Tina, they both got cancer within a year of each other and died within a year of each other, and that really
Wow.
yeah, and Rex was 14. He had a good life. Tina was only 9, and that came out of nowhere, and I was still getting over Rex passing, and once Tina went, and then saying goodbye to your partners that you're
Yeah.
so close with is really just takes a part of your soul. A part of you dies. And if you want to hear a grown man cry from his soul, that's something that will do it. So I couldn't. I told myself after that I wasn't going back. I was done. And not that canine was always my passion, but the pain of that
Yeah.
was so hard. And so I went into some leadership positions, and I was kind of thriving in that. And then the position for our commander came open, and my mentor, who kind of brought me along, told me about it, and I instantly got reignited that fire in me that because it's like once you're a handler, you're always a handler, and I went back and forth whether I wanted to do it, and I it just kept telling me to calling me back. So I went back, but it's funny because when I went back, they told me, "Look, you're the captain now. You're not getting a dog. You're going to be too busy." And I was pretty disappointed. But so for the first year, I didn't have a dog, but I was always banter with my direct boss, who I came up with in K. And I was like, "Hey, can I get a dog?" And she's like, "Nope, nope." And then finally, we were a little short on the team, and I asked, and she's like, "All right, you can have a dog in Tambo." And I stopped, and I was like, "Tambo?" And the story on Tambo was he was the dog that nobody wanted. He went through two different handlers. Couldn't bond with anybody. Some people couldn't handle him. I heard he wasn't good at home. You heard all these stories, and then he was probably the dog that I interacted with the least on the unit. And I looked at my boss and I said, I said, I don't know, because I had this whole envision I was going to go out to a vendor and
Yeah.
pick my brand new dog out. And she's like, "Look, that's the deal. If you want him, you got to take him." And
It's like
then
Turner and Hooch. Yeah.
yeah, and before I could even process it, I said I would do it, and then I went home that weekend, and then I was like, "Man, did I am I making the right decision?" And then I'm thinking, like, I just took over as I've only been the leader of the unit for a year, and am I going to get this dog and make a fool of myself? Is this dog going to make a fool out of me because he hasn't worked with anyone else? And I remember going to get him out of the kennel the first day, and I walk back and he's in the last kennel and it was all quiet and I stand I'm looking at him, he's looking at me and then it hit me. I'm looking at this dog that's guarded, aloof, that's stubborn. And I said, Jesus Christ, I said, I'm looking in a mirror. I'm looking at myself.
Yeah.
And those are the same labels that I've had, my entire life that I've had to overcome. I've always been the underdog with stuff that I've had to scratch and claw to get to where I'm at. And I said, maybe we're more alike than I think. And so that day everything changed. I mean, I remember getting him out of the kennel though, and there was no trust from him at first. He was curious about me, but it took a lot of time to really form that bond with him. And I think he's a dog. He just needed the right person to come along and bring that out of him. And I think that he knew that I was a lot like him as well. And and I think he saw through, everything, the bravado and the walls that I've, put up. And I think that's how we really connected. I think something higher really was, bringing us together. And, once I got his trust, we were an amazing team. And he went on to be the best dog I've had out of all three of them. If someone told me that from the beginning, I'd have told them you were crazy. But he tested me at times, but he was an amazing dog, and he just needed the right person to bring it out of him.
Right. And so that happens, and then you spend your time together. It's like, what was that type of like journey for you? Where it's like, how often are you kind of going back to like Rex or Tina? And did anything feel similar in terms of like the breakdown of your relationship with the dog, the growth with your relationship with the dog, like anything like that, that kind of like, or did did it just feel different with Tambo?
It felt different because, like, going back to my childhood, like I was, people said I was shy. I wasn't really shy. I've always been observant. And I like to sit back and observe and assess people's energy and personality. I always have as I was a kid. So, when I would go to family events when I was young, the animals would always gravitate toward me at events, and I would just kind of sit back and hang out with them. I remember my mom saying, "You really got a gift with the animals. They tend to gravitate towards you." And so when I got Rex and Tina, it was instant chemistry. We hit it off, right away. With Tambo, it was different, but I think it was more rewarding because I knew we were probably more alike than the other dogs, and I had to earn his trust. And once I was able to earn it, that bond and the bond we still have now, and it continues to grow, is so sacred. I mean, and it's unbreakable, and it's something I can't describe as we know what each other's thinking, and I can read his eyes and know where he's at, and that played a big part in me making a decision to go through with some of the medical procedures early on when the vets were telling me not to.
Right. Now, I know you've kind of hinted at the stuff the dog Tambo's gone through, but can you kind of elaborate in terms of like the stuff you had to deal with the dog?
Yeah, I mean, he didn't want to he when you worked him, he wanted to do everything on his own, right? And because he was used to that, and nobody kind of assisting him, and I think he got used to that. I'm kind of the lone wolf,
Yeah.
and now you want those dogs to always be independent, but there's always a time and place that mom or dad need to step in and provide guidance to that dog, right? The dog's searching, but then let's say it blows past an area, you want to bring them back and check them in a certain area, and that's when you need to be able to step in. And in the beginning, he just kind of wanted to do it on his own. He didn't really want to listen to my commands, and so that just it was baby steps, me just taking time to do small things with him and work with him and just be consistent. Being consistent with how you train your dog is key as well, because if you're kind of all over the place, because these dogs are so regimented, and I think he appreciated the consistency and somebody not giving up on him, and come showing up every day. And so I didn't take him home for like the first couple of weeks because I wanted us to get acclimated, bonding together. And then even when I brought him home, he would sleep near me, but he wouldn't come up to me. And then I would always just sit on the floor, and he would inch closer, and I'd let him do it on his own time. And then eventually, one night he came up and just rested himself on my leg, and I knew right there that we were getting there. And as we continued to work, he started to listen to me more, and he never became dependent on me, because you don't want the dog to be dependent on the handler. But there's a time and place when that handler needs to step in and sometimes take charge or redirect the dog, and that's the importance of having that dog have that trust in you as well.
Right. And so, as what exactly happened to Tambo? Where, and I do want to jump into like the Project Canine Hero and all that stuff, but like
Mhm.
like programs like that when a dog gets hurt or injured or sick or medical costs, like are those programs already in place, or is this something where you went through where you had to show initiative and start finding these things or creating these type of organizations?
So when Rex and Tina got sick, when they retired, there wasn't really any programs out there, and I remember,
Which is wild to me.
no, yeah, and I was draining my bank account, trying to save them with, treatments, and I'm talking, 20, $30,000, where I didn't have any money left. I wasn't
Right.
making the money I was making now, and there wasn't anything I wouldn't do for them. So these programs kind of started, and like Project Canine Hero, where because what a lot of people don't know, when these dogs retire, the full responsibility goes over to the handler. There's no healthcare system set up for them. They don't get anything in retirement. That burden fully falls on the handler to fund that. And that a lot of times, if you think at like NFL players, right, like they're prime athletes, but after the fact, that's when the body starts breaking down. That's when they really kind of need, that care and stuff like that. Um, so those programs are key. And I kind of came into Project Canine here. I had met Jason, the founder, a few years earlier. I would go to a lot of canine conferences, and we met, and we talked, and he had helped another dog on our unit that had some issues, prior to that. So, Tambo ended up retiring. He tore a ligament in his front leg, and he was 9 years old. And you know they could have did surgery, but they said, "Look, we don't have to put him through surgery. The only problem is he probably won't be able to work the same." But at that point, he was getting near retirement age, so we made the decision to retire him. And he was doing, we did some rehab. He had a custom brace, and he was doing great in retirement. But when I really needed Project Canine Hero is, I would say probably about a year after Tambo retired, he was chasing a squirrel of all things in the backyard, and ended up, not only tearing one ACL, but he tore both of them at the same
Wow.
time. So he had a double ACL tear, and just the surgery for one of them alone, John, is 7 grand. So I called Jason up, and he was able to get Tambo in the program, and they got his surgery funded right away.
That's awesome. And I know
Yeah.
you've done custom shirts and stuff with Tambo and the organization and stuff like that. So it's like it's cool that those programs are starting to pop off and actually. And the toughest thing for me, it's like with, I guess for some people too, it's like if you're not into law enforcement or you don't know this stuff, but you hear these stories, it's just like it's cool to know that something like Project K9, anyone could donate to it. Anyone can buy a shirt that supports this type of funding for surgery for retired dogs and stuff. It's what a cool program.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I was talking to Jason, a couple weeks ago when we were tallying up, because he not only funded that surgery, but all the other stuff that happened to Tambo afterwards. And I think we're at like 30 some thousand right now that they've put into his medical care. And I might have been able to swing that, but where you have to think about is some handlers that are maybe newer, and something happens to their dog and retires. A lot of them may not have that type of money, and I don't think that I've always said that I don't think a handler should ever have to make a decision on their dog that served our country, based on finances.
Hmm.
And that's the great thing about Project Canine Hero, and other programs like Paws of Honor that are out there, that do these great things for these dogs that are out there. So Jason usually he tries to pull in the dogs that really need it, that have significant health issues, because some dogs retire and they don't have any issues for years, and so he
Right.
tries to bring in the ones that have have cancer or been shot in the line of duty or hitting their cruiser or stabbed and really need these big surgeries. So we got the ACL repaired, and again he was doing great. And then I wanted to get back to Project Canine here, so I was doing Tambo kind of became an ambassador for the
Yeah.
program. So I was doing a lot of events. I did the Clemson Tigers football. We did Seattle Mariners, the Baltimore Orioles, and then on Tambo's 11th birthday, which was cool. They honored him for their salute to service game, and they put him up on the jumbotron and said happy birthday to him. So I got a picture of it on my Instagram. It was really a cool moment to just to see that and to look how far that he had come and to be, standing on the stadium field with these military heroes. I didn't feel worthy to be on there with them, but it was all about, Tambo and, he had earned that recognition.
It's you bring that up. It's always interesting to me when you see like these dogs that like law enforcement, military. It's like they're serving, and so it's so cool to like see them get the retirement ceremony or like it's just it boggles my mind that people don't realize that when you see a canine unit driving down or doing their thing, there's two officers in that car,
Yeah.
and it's such a unique thing. And I know you talked about where you just driving the car in silence, but like if you were in a car with a squad car with one of your just a regular dude, people are talking, drinking coffee. It's like that. It's so fascinating how that relationship is so different, yet should be equally treated the same in terms of just like that relationship there. What a fascinating thing.
It's funny. And, with my first two dogs, it's almost like you end up having conversations with them as well, even though they may not
Right.
be talking back a lot, but I listened to a lot of hip hop, and there was Eminem I would put on, and my second dog Tina loved it. I would put certain songs on, and she would howl, and she knew the songs, and so there's those little quirks and those little moments that you share together, and there's something to be said about being on the road with your dog, going to work or coming home, that you're in it together. And that is the most amazing feeling, that you accomplish something together and you never feel like you're alone. And we talked about, wellness earlier. And, for me, my canines have always been my security blanket, right? It's like when I'm going through the trials and tribulations of life, um, it's that presence, that constant silent presence, that being by your side as you feel like you're not in it alone, and they won't leave your side. And it gives you a sense of security and just that pride. And I know, like, when Tambo retired and I went back into leadership, it was so hard, going back to work, because one, he still tried to come to work with me, but then driving to work in silence by myself, there was just that void there. And I still feel it till today, driving to work and not having them with me. But then I have to look at I was blessed to spend 17 years in canine and retire three amazing dogs and have that time with them. And I got to do a profession that not many people get a chance to do.
If what advice would you have for someone that not only want to become canine, but law enforcement in general? Say there's some kid out there right now that's about to graduate college, always wants to be a cop. Like, what advice do you have to him? Because it's like seems like every time you turn on TV, there's this anti-kill cop protest or speeches and all this crazy stuff that's happening. And for me, I love law enforcement, but if I had to do it again right now, I'd be like, is it really worth it? I mean, you want to serve and
And
give back to the community, but like, is it really worth either your own agency not looking up for you or the people in your own town throwing rocks at you? So it's like, if I'm a kid right now, if I want to become a cop, like, what do you say to them to be like, hey, this is an admirable job?
I kind of lay it out for him like it was for me, when I was young, is that, we're out there to help people and assist people and educating those people at a young age. And I don't think they do that as much now, like when we were younger. But, for me, it's regardless, I would do it all over again now, because this is what I'm passionate about. And this is what, I signed up for, regardless of the culture that's out there. It's what I love to do, and I want to
It's awesome.
support it. It's kind of
Yeah.
it's kind of like being a freaking Baltimore Orioles fan, right? All those losing seasons. It's like that's your
Yikes.
team, though, man. You're riding with them regardless. And
Yeah.
being for me being in law enforcement, there's times where everybody revered law enforcement as heroes, and now you become the last several years you're the villain, right? But
Right.
you still stay consistent to the passion that you have. And I think that the approach that I always have is just helping other people, being a good person. And I always say this as a leader, and it's what my mentor said to me is when you focus on the success of others, your own success will always take care of itself, because it's the people that take shortcuts. They may get a rung or two ahead of you for a brief period of time, but they get exposed. Eventually, it's just about being a good person and wanting to
Yeah.
to do good in the world for the right reasons.
Right. If people want to get involved with Project K9 uh or Project K9 or keep following you and your journey with Tambo and the stuff you guys are doing for the different programs stuff like that, like how do people kind of reach out to those programs and how do they kind of stay in touch with you?
So Project K9 Hero, they're on all social media platforms under Project K9 Hero. And they not only have Tambo's story on there, but every other dog that's in the program. And they can also go to projectk9hero.org, and then on all social media platforms, and then Tambo. I'm primarily on Instagram right now, and that is lowercase k, the number nine underscore Tambo, Tambo. And I kind of been documenting, since July. I've really dove deeper into it. I've kind of just really been documenting his journey on there of what he's going through.
And if you do you have merch up there that people can buy that goes towards these organizations and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I'm doing a lot of. I was linked up with a company in Houston for a while with Houndbound Brewing, and we've
Oh
done
yeah.
some runs on the shirts. We had a Tambo Strong shirt, and then we just did one that turned out really cool. Defy the Odds one that sold really well, and we'll probably do some more in the future. And then right now we don't have any up, but if somebody wanted to get one, we could run it back again. And then I'm working with some other apparel companies right now that are possibly interested in doing some Tambo themed apparel, which I'm excited about. But yeah, and the good thing with Houndbound is that a portion of the proceeds, when you buy them, will go to Project K9 Hero. Um, and then there's another company, New South Trading Company, that also has the original Tambo shirt that you can get off there as well.
It's I had Rick Hogg on this podcast a couple years ago, and his dog was actually in the Far Cry video game. So we actually got to get maybe Tambo in a video game or something like that to
Yeah.
really market this thing.
Hey man, I'm up for anything, man. We're doing a lot of cool things right now. I'm getting ready to. I'm working with a local coffee company in Florida, upstart company. We're gonna have a Tambo themed coffee
Awesome.
coming out in the new year. And then probably the most exciting is I have two books coming out. I have Tambo's autobiography, which is his whole story. It really not only and it's not just a story about a dog, John. It's really about the story of me coming back to canine, kind of what I touched on, seeing myself in Tambo and how that his battle and how that really changed me, and really, and it talks about forging my relationship with my father,
Yeah.
reigniting and so that's a great story. And then I'm also, believe it or not, doing a children's book, and that'll be coming out as well. And that book I was really passionate about because I had my son late in life, and me growing up without a father, I knew what it was like to feel small or unseen. And I know what how being a dad now is. Your kids are everything. So I wanted it to be something where for children that are sick or felt small, and Tambo's in there, and he kind of is the theme is that he inspires them to never give up, and to continue to have hope when things seem like there isn't any, but in a way that a child can understand. And then one of the cool things I did in the back, I had a kind of a reference for like parents and teachers of how to discuss that with your child, and what you learn from the book. And my hope is when the book is done, I want to go to some children's cancer hospitals
Yeah.
and donate the first couple hundred books. And I was going to get some stuffed, little stuffed Tambo German shepherds
Yeah.
and give them out. And that's something that I'm really excited about, and to bring hope to people, because once Tambo got cancer, I had people reaching out to me with their own stories of cancer, which really hit me deep. Because tell me their dad has stage 4 cancer
Yeah.
and it's terminal, but he wanted to stop chemo and he decided not to because he saw Tambo continuing to fight. Or a mother that says, hey, my son has cancer, it's not good, but he enjoys seeing Tambo's posts, and they can relate to it. And
Yeah.
kind of where it came full circle for me is my dad just got diagnosed with lymphoma, and he's going through a real hard time right now. I don't know how that's going to turn out, but and so we're kind of rebuilding our relationship. But one of the things in that is that brought us together was Tambo, because he related to Tambo and would ask how Tambo was doing, and in ways that opened up our conversation to bring us together. So
Right.
he's really kind of inspired so many. And this is a dog that was given, when he got his diagnosis, he was given 2 weeks to live in July, and here he is in 2026.
Right.
Um, and people just they can't figure it out how he's still here.
Well, it's such a fascinating thing, but where it's like here's a dog that no one wanted or no one could handle, and that their first response was, this thing's kind of crazy, and it's just crazy how like that type of thing can mend so many broken hearts or fences or create new opportunities. That the permutations of you guys finding each other, whether it's a relationship with your dad or helping these kids or the cancer wards and stuff like that, where it's like that's profound. I mean, that right, it's so profound. Like, where this is bigger than just a cop and his dog. This is so much bigger than that.
Yeah, and everybody I've talked to is saying that it needs to be a movie. And
Yeah.
so that is that's my goal. So I'm hoping eventually that will be there. And I think right now, in a world where there's so much crazy shit out there and negative
Oh,
shit, that this is
God.
this is such a
Feel
touching
good
story.
story. It's so feel
and
good.
and it has all the feels. It's a roller coaster, but it really is a feel good story. And I'm a firm believer, and people say that to me all the time, is I give Tambo a lot of credit, but they're like, don't sell yourself short, because your positivity toward him, when is breathing life back into him when he feels like he wants to quit. And I'll give you a example of that. When this all started, he had a mass rupture on his spleen, and I came home, and that's what I was talking about when I found him, and he was bleeding out. And ironically, I left work early that day, which I never did. And if I would have came
Mm,
home 2 hours later, he wouldn't have made it. So something told me to go home that day. Got him to the vet, and they came out and said his spleen is covered in masses. He's bleeding out. Do you want to go? We can go through with the surgery and remove his spleen and give him a blood transfusion, but we're pretty sure this is cancer as well. Do you want to go through with it? And by the way, it's going to be from between $9,000 and $12,000. The cost I wasn't worried about. I called Jason up, and that eliminated that right away. He said, we got your back 100%. But I almost felt like they wanted what most people would say is, yeah, I don't want him to suffer. I want to let him go peacefully. But I went back and saw him, and I talk about this, and we kind of locked eyes. And this is such a stoic dog. In the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes, and I'd never seen that before. And I was getting emotional. But then I thought about it, John. I'm like, man, this dog's been there for me for 7 years, my security blanket for everything. It's my time to
yeah.
be there for him now. And I could see in his eyes, and it may sound crazy, that he was telling me, I'm not ready to die. And I knew this dog, and we had bonded because we were so much alike, that I told him, I want to do the surgery. Let's go for it. And so they did it. And then they even called me an hour later after they had him opened up, and they said, look, there's even more masses on the spleen than we thought. We're going to remove it. But hey, by the way, we think his liver's covered in masses as well. Are you sure you want to go through with this? And I didn't hesitate. And I said, yes. I said, I know this dog. Um, and they're like, well, he may not even make it through the surgery or the recovery. And I told him I still wanted to do it, and which I know a lot of people maybe
Yeah.
wouldn't, but I knew this dog and I knew what he had been through, and he pulled through, and he recovered. And I remember after that, then they tell me, well, now he's got 14 to 21 days to live. But hey, go ahead and go see an oncologist. So I got an appointment with oncology, and I remember sitting there, and she's telling me, look, if this cancer is on the liver now as well, we removed the spleen, chemotherapy is not going to do anything. So they took him back for an ultrasound, and I was wondering, like, man, if they come back and say it's on the liver, am I going to have to make a decision right now? Because then I run the risk of sorry about that in my phone. Now I run the risk of another mass rupturing on his spleen. But she came back by the grace of God. She said that the cancer is not on the liver, and we can start chemotherapy right away. And so we started it we started it that day. And again, the chemotherapy sessions were $700 a session. And again, that was just a simple phone call to Jason, and him telling me he's going to cover it. Which he did. So Tambo went for 5 intravenous chemotherapy sessions, once every 2 weeks. He went through his stages of nausea, but he was a champ. I mean, he fought through it. And then in between there, I started doing like different skits for the chemotherapy to bring some happiness to people in dark times. So, it's on my Instagram, but I did like a John Cena theme where we wore never give up t-shirts. And yeah, you may be able to see the Cena towel behind me, but
Yep.
I had him come out of the house, and I played John Cena's music, and then we did a Rocky theme, No Easy Way Out, and I got him a Rocky costume where he had boxing gloves on, and people loved it. And that's the thing is there's always going to be negative and dark times, but
Yes.
we gotta be able to find some light in that, right? And I try to, and I think that's what inspired people, is even though this is the darkest times of my life, you can still be able to smile and find some happiness. So we ran through it, and he went through the 5 sessions, and he went back for a check, and recently, and they said there's still no signs of cancer, and they can't figure it out. So he's on an oral chemo pill right now that he takes every day. And we got another big appointment coming up on January 19th, because they're going to do some in-depth imaging just to make sure the cancer hasn't returned. And the type of cancer he has is called hemangiosarcoma. If you read up on it, John, it's called the silent killer in dogs, and it's a very aggressive and terminal cancer. So they're really miffed how he's really just been still here. And
Right.
that kind of cultivated in November, because the Philadelphia Eagles contacted me, and wanted to honor me on Sunday Night Football. So on November 16th, against the Lions for their salute to service game, they brought Tambo out and I out on the field, first time out, first quarter. And it was a cool moment, man, because they talked about his service to the country, talked about his injuries, and then they kind of went into, and now he's fighting the biggest battle of his life and given 2 weeks to live in July with an aggressive cancer. And when that happened, the Philadelphia crowd stood on their feet and gave me a standing ovation. And I mean, I had goosebumps. And on cue, like, Tambo came to life. The camera was right on him, and you can see the video on my Instagram. He started barking, and it wasn't an aggressive bark. It was a bark to say, "I'm
Yeah.
here. I'm still alive,
Yeah.
and I'm still fighting." And man, what a full circle moment. And like the day before that was even more symbolic, because we went and ran the Rocky Steps in downtown Philly. And I'd always, and think about it, before that, how symbolic this was, as I was leaning into that
Yeah.
Rocky theme with Tambo. Tambo got his chemotherapy right outside of Philadelphia. And so it all just kind of, it's crazy how it all came together. And they ended the public address announcer, called Tambo a Philadelphia fighter, true and true. And man, I loved it, and it was just symbolic, and how parallel it was to the Rocky movie, and that's something that always resonated with me when I was a kid, as being the underdog and defying the odds and proving people wrong, and I love doing that. And I saw the same thing in Tambo, so it was just a cool moment for him and I, for two people that weren't supposed to amount to much, being on a field on Sunday night football in a national spotlight, getting the standing ovation. So it was pretty amazing.
Yeah, and Philly fans are notorious for being complete assholes. So I'm
Yeah.
the fact that Tambo was able to unite everyone, that says something.
Absolutely. So he had his own Eagles jersey on, and
Oh,
and I
that's
had a
awesome.
old school Dawkins jersey on. So I thought that was fitting for the night. So but yeah, Philly's been good to us. Between the Phillies and the Eagles. They've really kind of taken care of Tambo and I, and I'm very appreciative of that.
It's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
it's yeah, again, what a fascinating story. I can't wait to read the book. And again, I can't thank you enough for Chris for jumping on here and talking about Tambo and your life and career. And we'll have to do this again soon because it's like when I talk to people like you, it's like I always get like I have a set number of like I have questions in my head or I jot down, but it's so interesting hearing you talk about stuff where it's just like we're gonna have to do a part two again because I just like I'm gonna go further down the rabbit hole with it. But yeah, give you your time for this and what a great talk.
Yeah, and I tell Tambo all the time is when he got sick, I said this is our final call together. This is our last adventure, but we're gonna make it last as long as possible. And what I can say right now is we're not done for a long shot. We got big things to conquer this year. So I'm confident the next time I come on, I'm gonna have some even greater stories to be able to share with you.
No, I love it. And again, thank you for the time. Be safe, and we'll chat soon.
Yeah, I appreciate it, John. Thank you.